When Donald Trump announced his run for president in 2024, he did what he's always done best. He painted himself as the ultimate America First candidate, a leader who wouldn't bow down to global elites or waste taxpayer dollars on foreign wars. His campaign was all about making America strong again, independent, and focused on its own people. And the message resonated with millions of Americans who were fed up with endless wars, bloated foreign aid budgets, and a government that seemed more interested in fixing the problems of other countries than addressing issues at home. But if you take a closer look at Trump's policies and decisions, especially his foreign policy, something doesn't quite add up. Sure, he talked a lot about slashing foreign aid, saying America wouldn't hand out money to countries that didn't respect us, and he did follow through on that, sort of. Aid to most countries was cut or heavily restricted. But there's one glaring exception to this rule, and that's Israel. In fact, not only did Trump continue to aid Israel, but he doubled down on his support for the country in ways that go far beyond what previous presidents have done.
This was a special token of affection given by myself and the First Lady to Prime Minister and the First Lady of Israel, and it's a key. We call it a key to the White House, and it's a key to our country and to our hearts. And you've been an amazing leader for a long period of time, and this is, in many respects, the big day, because this is something that's very special. And the U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
Also, President Trump approved delivery of thousands of 2,000 Mk-84 bombs to Israel, despite an ongoing ceasefire agreement in the region. Approximately 1,800 bombs were authorized for shipment, reversing a hold placed by the previous administration due to concerns over escalating tensions and civilian casualties in Gaza. But this commitment to Israel has been consistent regardless of who the president is in the White House. For decades, it hasn't really mattered who's sitting in the Oval Office. Whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, every U.S. president has gone out of their way to support Israel. Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, they've all given Israel unwavering backing, even when it caused a ton of controversy and it costed billions and billions of dollars. So what's going on here? Why does every president, regardless of their party or personal beliefs, go out of their way to support Israel, especially at our own expense? Why do we continue to send military and financial support, while at the same time our country is in decline and deeply in debt? Well, what if I told you that for decades, a foreign leader has had more influence over U.S. foreign policy than our own elected officials? And it sounds crazy, but if you take a look at the facts, it's hard to deny. And that leader is Benjamin Netanyahu. And his impact on America's decisions, particularly in the Middle East, has been nothing short of staggering and deeply troubling. Netanyahu isn't just the longest-serving prime minister of Israel. He's also a master manipulator who's managed to bend the most powerful country in the world to his will. And while we hear endless talk about America first, the reality is that Netanyahu's agenda has consistently come first, no matter who's in the White House. Before we dive deeper into just how much influence this man has in America, let's talk about who he is. Born in 1949, Netanyahu grew up in a staunchly Zionist household, deeply shaped by his father's ultra-nationalist ideology. His father was a historian and a prominent figure in the revisionist Zionist movement that called for a greater Israel that included not only Palestinian territories, but also parts of neighboring countries such as Jordan, Syria. His father's radical Zionist ideology played a significant role and explains some of Netanyahu's later decisions as prime minister. Netanyahu's time in the U.S., attending school, and later working also gave him a unique understanding of American culture and politics, something he used masterfully throughout his career. Netanyahu's political rise began in the 1980s when he was appointed as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. During this time, he became known for his articulate defense of Israel on the international stage, particularly in the face of criticism from the United Nations. His charisma and ability to communicate effectively with Western audiences made him a rising star in Israeli politics. By the 1990s, Netanyahu had positioned himself as a leader of the Likud party, a right-wing political faction that emphasized national security and hardline stances against Palestinian statehood. In 1996, Netanyahu was elected Prime Minister of Israel for the first time, becoming the youngest person to ever hold this office. By the time he became Prime Minister in 1996, Netanyahu had already laid out the groundwork for his strategy. Keep America firmly on Israel's side no matter what the cost is. So how exactly has Netanyahu managed to wield such power and influence over U.S. foreign policy? It boils down to three things: lobbying, relationships, and fear-mongering. Netanyahu's influence wouldn't be possible without the help of pro-Israel lobbying groups, particularly AIPAC, or the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. AIPAC isn't just a lobbying group, it's one of the most powerful political forces in Washington. Through massive campaign donations, aggressive PR campaigns, and relentless pressure on lawmakers, AIPAC ensures that support for Israel is a bipartisan issue. Netanyahu uses AIPAC as a megaphone for his agenda, ensuring that no U.S. politician, whether Republican or Democrat, dares to criticize Israel without risking their career. And it's no coincidence that every U.S. president and Congress over the past few decades has bent over backwards to support Israel, even when it's been controversial or outright harmful to American interests.
Well, I have Republicans who come to me on the floor and say, I wish I could vote with you today. Yours is the right vote, but I would just take too much flack back home. And I have Republicans who come to me and say, that's wrong what AIPAC is doing to you. Let me talk to my AIPAC person. By the way, everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are, firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
I don't know how it works on the Democrat side, but that's how it works on the Republican side.
In the 2024 election cycle, AIPAC's financial involvement became even more pronounced. Reports indicate that AIPAC and its affiliates spent over $100 million during this period. Their primary goal is to unseat candidates who were critical of Israel's actions, particularly those who voiced opposition to Israel's military operations in Gaza. One notable example was Representative Jamal Bowman from New York. Bowman, a member of the Progressive Squad, faced significant opposition from pro-Israel groups due to his criticism of Israel's policies. In the 2024 Democratic primary, Bowman lost to George Latimer, a more moderate Democrat who received substantial support from AIPAC. This defeat was seen as a direct result of AIPAC's financial intervention in the race. Besides using AIPAC and other pro-Israeli groups to push for financial and military support, Netanyahu is also a master at playing the political game, and he's built strong relationships with every U.S. president since Clinton. He's really good at convincing American leadership that Israel's regional superiority is critical to America's national security, and that Israel's enemies are automatically America's enemies as well. One of the most effective strategies has been to appeal directly to Congress, bypassing the White House when necessary. This approach was particularly evident during the Obama administration, but its roots can be traced back to his earlier interactions with Clinton and Bush. For example, during the Clinton years, Netanyahu worked closely with Republican leaders in Congress to undermine Clinton's administration's efforts to pressure Israel into making concessions to the Palestinians. Then, during the Bush administration, Netanyahu leveraged his relationship with neocons to shape U.S. policy in the Middle East. Take the Iraq War as an example. Catastrophic intervention that led to the deaths of thousands of American soldiers and countless Iraqi civilians. Well, Netanyahu had his fingerprints all over that mess. Back in 2002, he testified before the U.S. Congress, insisting that toppling Saddam Hussein would bring peace and stability to the Middle East.
That a clear connection between Saddam and September 11th must be established before we have a right to prevent the next September 11th. Well, I think not. I'll try to give an analogy. All analogies are imperfect, but here is one. If you try to defeat the mafia, you don't just go after the foot soldiers who carried out the last attack, or even stop with the apprehension of the particular Don who sent them. You go after the entire network of organized crime, all the families, all the organizations, all of them. Well, likewise, if you intend to defeat terror, you don't just go after the terrorists who carried out the last attack, or even the particular regime that sent them. You go after the entire network of terror, all the regimes that support terror, all the organizations that they harbor, all of them.
And unfortunately, the US leadership were convinced by him and launched their illegal invasion of Iraq. And instead of ushering in an era of peace, the removal of Saddam plunged Iraq into chaos, gave rise to extremist groups, and totally destabilized the entire region. Netanyahu was not just wrong, he was disastrously misleading and deliberately misleading. He faced no consequences for his role in advocating for a war that has had such devastating and far-reaching effects. And if we fast forward to 2011, we see a similar pattern in Libya. While Netanyahu wasn't as publicly vocal about Libya as he was about Iraq, his influence was still felt. The Israeli government under Netanyahu's leadership supported the NATO-led intervention to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. And finally today, the biggest obsession and goal is to convince Americans to get involved in a war with Iran, to remove the leadership just like we've done previously with other Israeli neighbors. Netanyahu has been obsessively fixated on Iran for decades, constantly portraying it as an existential threat to Israel. He's been relentless in his efforts to drag the US into a confrontation with Tehran. In 2015, he took the unprecedented step of addressing the US Congress without an invitation from the sitting president, vehemently opposing the Iran nuclear deal. He called it a very bad deal and did everything in his power to sabotage it. His meddling didn't stop there. Netanyahu has been openly advocating for regime change in Iran, stating that the fall of the Iranian government will happen sooner than people think. Take a listen.
When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different. Our two ancient peoples, the Jewish people and the Persian people, will finally be at peace.
But why is Netanyahu and his allies doing all of this? Why are they so focused on influencing American politics to their benefit? Well, we need to understand what Netanyahu's ultimate goal is. At the core of Netanyahu's political ideology is a vision of Israel as an unassailable regional power, secure with expanded borders and free from threats posed by its neighbors. This vision is rooted in a hardline Zionist perspective that prioritizes territorial expansion and military strength over diplomacy and compromise. One of Netanyahu's most controversial and enduring goals has been the expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank. These settlements, considered illegal under international law, have been a major obstacle to the peace process and a source of the ongoing conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Netanyahu has not only supported the growth of these settlements, but has actively worked to legitimize them.
Going to DEFCON 1. All-out combat, all guns blazing. That's how Israeli newspaper Haaretz is describing Benjamin Netanyahu's election footing. In his arsenal, the promise of another West Bank settlement.
Today, the government will decide on starting a process of forming the settlement of Mevo Od Jericho in the Jordan Valley. The final approval will be given, of course, when the next government is formed.
In a rare move, Mr. Netanyahu held his weekly cabinet meeting in the Jordan Valley.
It's not only the eastern gate of the State of Israel, it's the defence wall from the east, since the Jordan Valley, along with the territories that control it, which will be a part of the State of Israel, assures that the Israeli army will be here forever.
Israel has already built 37 settlements in the valley and describes it as being of paramount strategic value. With its fertile soils and water, agriculture there generates hundreds of millions of dollars. Now he appears to be going even further than his pledge to annex the valley, saying he will also annex what he called vital parts of the West Bank.
Under Netanyahu's leadership, the Israeli government has accelerated the construction of settlements, seized Palestinian land, and implemented policies designed to entrench Israeli control over the West Bank. This includes the demolition of Palestinian homes and the creation of a separate legal system for settlers and Palestinians. In other words, apartheid. However, many analysts believe that the ultimate goal for Netanyahu appears to be a military confrontation with Iran that would cripple its nuclear capabilities and weaken its influence in the region. Such a conflict will not only eliminate a key rival or the the key rival, but also position Israel as the dominant power in the Middle East. But again, this goal is unattainable without the backing of the United States, which provides Israel with the military hardware, the intelligence, the financial support to wage such a large-scale war. The United States is Israel's largest provider of military aid, supplying advanced weapon systems, intelligence sharing, and joint training exercises. This aid, which amounts to approximately $3.8 billion annually under a 10-year agreement signed in 2016, ensures that Israel maintains a qualitative military edge over its neighbors. Netanyahu has used this military support to bolster Israel's position in the region, conducting airstrikes in Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza, and he's also relied on U.S.-supplied weapons and technology to enforce Israel's occupation of the West Bank. Without American military aid, Israel would be unable to sustain these operations, leaving Netanyahu's expansionist agenda just a fantasy. While Netanyahu has successfully manipulated American politics to serve these goals, his policies run counter to U.S. interests in the region. By aligning itself with Israel, the U.S. has alienated key allies in the Arab world and undermined its credibility as an honest broker in the peace process. In the end, Netanyahu's ultimate goal is clear: more land, more power, and a Middle East dominated by Israel. He's willing to use any means necessary to achieve this, including leveraging the United States and disregarding international norms. But this approach is short-sighted and dangerous. It's fueling conflict, undermining peace, and isolating Israel on the global stage. Netanyahu may see himself as a strong leader protecting Israel's interests, but his actions are doing more harm than good. And that's not just a problem for Israel, it's a problem for the United States and its reputation on the global stage. And under Trump, expect this to continue. He's going to continue to support Israel, going to send them weapons, support, and his recent statements prove me right. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it informative and interesting, I'm sure you're going to like this video here or this video here. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.